It's been enjoying us.
Busy week.
So I just
Sorry.
started the recording just for your knowledge.
Okay. Hi, Seth. How are you?
Good, and you?
Good. Yeah,
I'm glad you could make it. I mean, you're like 3 minutes away, right? But
I was in the parking lot in another meeting. I was straight there, my phone in another meeting. Then I have another one at 10:30, so I may need to.
We'll see how maybe what we can do is, okay, so we have 3 of the committee members, so, oh, there's Gilbert. Thank you, Gilbert. Sorry, I just disregard my email.
That's okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
good morning, Gilbert.
Morning. Okay, then I think what we can do, we can go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we do have Chairman Martinez here. So if you would like to start the meeting, Omar, and I would just assume that perhaps you might become the chair for the subcommittee as well, just a guess. But
You want me to?
if you want to go ahead and start it, I'm going to fix the air conditioning.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. For the record, it is 9:04 a.m. We have met quorum to today's subcommittee 4 meeting. And so, as Annette said, item number 2, we have to select the chair. I volunteer because I'm here live. That's one requirement, that the person live has to be, the chair has to be in person. Gisela said she might leave early, so she already said no.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So without any other options.
Does that mean that Isela would want to make a motion that you serve as chair?
That I can't do. I'll make a motion to have Omar be the chair of the subcommittee.
And then Gilbert or Anita, if either one of you want to make a second.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Probably not. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item number 3, ACOM, take it away, please.
Thank you.
So this is Jeff. So we have from AECOM here, we have me and Gilbert and Taylor Nordstrom. Taylor's doing a lot of work with the GLO on coastal resiliency and has a lot of experience with funding programs that our particular team that we've been using here lacks. So she knows a lot about the FEMA and HUD and FEMA and HUD funding programs. And so I've invited her to the meeting to help out when we eventually get to the funding part of it. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about this Task 8 legislative and regulatory recommendations. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is review the guidance for Task 8. This is what we're trying to get done today, is try to basically get a list of things that we can present for the plan and Task 8. It includes and today we're specifically dealing with Task 8 tasks as relates to the within the county of El Paso, so the city of El Paso / EPW, El Paso County, and the irrigation district EPC WID1. Those are the main entities, but it would also include any incorporated areas within El Paso County. We're going to discuss the regulatory administrative recommendations and other recommendations and revenue raising. And then we have in the agenda that we're going to vote on potential subcommittee recommendations, but I've had some conversations since we sent out the agenda, and we're not going to vote today. We're going to create a list today, send it out, let people add to the list, and then I think we're going to have a short meeting later to basically just vote on the new things that are added to the list that will be then recommended to the regional flood planning group. So I think we are going to need another meeting, but I think it's going to be very short. So let's discuss what the guidance for task 8 is. Okay, so there's two different parts of this. It's pretty simple guidance. So what this task is requiring is to basically survey and talk to people, talk to stakeholders within the region about what they think is needed for legislative recommendations, regulatory or administrative recommendations, other recommendations, or fundraising recommendations as applies to three things: the floodplain management, flood mitigation planning, and flood mitigation implementation. So let's talk just briefly what those definitions mean, because we're going to go through each of these separately for the three things they want recommendations for. And the first one is floodplain management, and that's basically managing development within the region to ensure compliance with the federal flood insurance program, or in a more general sense, keep control over changes of drainage within the area. And in the larger sense, development permitting also comes under this particular heading. And the second heading is flood mitigation planning, and flood mitigation planning includes identifying and defining risks, defining and evaluating alternatives, and prioritizing alternatives, all for the purpose of flood mitigation. So the questions are, what can be done to facilitate getting this planning done? Are there legislative things and administrative things, et cetera, funding things that we can do to facilitate getting that done? And then implementation of the mitigation measures, funding and being able to implement. So implement includes funding, but it also includes permitting. If there's permitting issues or coordination issues with other agencies that are impeding getting things done, then let's get them written down and try to set up some kind of plan to address them. That's the purpose of this. So I want to say that we aren't starting from scratch here, that we've already had a whole slew of discussions in previous meetings that deal with FMEs and FMSs and FMPs, and particularly the FMEs and the FMSs. It's so pleasant to not have to explain those terms every time. Everybody knows them already. So I wanted to go over the ones that we've already got in the plan that have been approved as FMEs and FMSs. So we're not starting off from zero here. All right, so just want to cover these real quickly. So in the category other, we have an FME for formalizing the maintenance program of the Rio Grande Channel within El Paso County in a way where there's some formal interaction between IBWC and the county stakeholders, so that there's more active oversight in terms of interaction with the IBWC on maintaining the river. Second one, and that's FME1. Second one is the one that I think is the highest priority within the region in terms of talking to people so far in the meetings, and that's getting the levees certified through El Paso County. And again, this particular one provides resources to get the levees certified as quickly as we can get them certified, and also provides formal interaction between IBWC and the stakeholders on that topic. The next one is dealing with control of sediment from the Franklin Mountains and into the city, and from the eastern El Paso County into the Montana sector, and setting up a formal involvement so that the Fort Bliss requirements don't interfere with getting projects done that are within the city of the county. And those are all in the other category. these ones that are shaded out are not dealing specifically with El Paso County. And the regulatory admin, we had a FMS requested to deal with all-terrain vehicle induced erosion on state lands. And so we have an FMS to deal with that, to see if see what's working and not working, and see if there's something else we can do, either regulatory or program wise, to basically address that issue, find out where the issue is important and find a way to address it. 3 other regulatory ones. We had a series of meetings on what the issues were that came out of the 2006 and the 2015 floods. And there was a request for an FMS to basically provide design standard improvements to the City of El Paso manual for specific things. And the things that were requested were inlets, curb cuts, on-site storage, sediment controls at inlets, and discharges into the irrigation drains. We're gonna hit this topic again later on during today, and if you can think of other things you want addressed other than those, we would then add to this FMS. Another one that was more general was having a program to address erosion in natural channels. And we were to develop recommendations for design guidelines for erosion mitigation in arroyos. And at this point, we don't have as yet a designated sponsor for that particular FMS. Is this something that is important to El Paso County or the City of El Paso or the irrigation district that you want to be potentially included as a sponsor? You're not committing as a sponsor, but you would be in the loop if this were to go forward.
Hey, Jeff, the feedback that I got from that item is, as long as it's within our boundaries, the irrigation district's boundaries, we can be a sponsor. So there's arroyos that end up in our district in boundaries.
Yeah.
So we can solve half of the problem, because most of them
show up in. All right, so I'm gonna put in X that you can be listed as a sponsor for this one. And again, this is basically the way this is going to work is the guidelines will be written based upon arroyos in El Paso County, because you've got a variety of them. You've got ones that come out of the Franklins, and you have ones that come off the Mesa. So you've got basic types of alluvial fans and arroyos. And so we think we can come up with design guidelines for each one of those types. And then those guidelines could be used by the remainder of the region, depending upon what their individual situation is, right?
Jeff, one other request, Jeff. One of the things we're doing now is we are metering arroyos, some of the larger ones, so that we can document a lot of there are those sporadic flows. We're using low-cost metering stations. And so if your design guidelines can include that, it'd be great.
Yeah, what we've got in this particular FMS is we have a task where we are going to, actually it's a different FMS. It's an FMS on measuring sediment in arroyos, but we'll be calibrating the arroyos that we've got gauged so that we can come up with better estimates for what the flows are. There's a potentially major difference between the flows that are actually coming off of the arroyos and what's being estimated by the models, because we don't have any gauges on the arroyos. So part of that sediment one will be to basically do a reality check on what we're saying the flows off the arroyos are. So we also have a we also have an FMS dealing with developing guidelines for the design of outfalls. There's been some experience with the outfalls into the Rio Grande. Some of the designs work well, some of the designs don't. So we would basically meet with the stakeholders and come up with more refined standards for how those outfalls work that go into the Rio Grande. So those already exist, and so they're kind of our starting point. So we've got those already taken care of. This task already has some input associated with it. So back to the scope of work, we're going to talk about legislative recommendations and just step through floodplain management, flood mitigation planning, and implementation and mitigation measures. So legislative recommendations for floodplain management. What areas of concern or issues related to floodplain management are a priority that might be addressed by changes to state legislation? Here's some topics that might be discussed. So counties have difficulty funding drainage and stormwater infrastructure in unincorporated areas. Is that a true statement? And are there things that we might be able to get the state to do to ease ease counties' difficulty in getting funding? I guess most of this would go to Gilbert Saldana.
Hey Jeff, yeah, I mean, obviously that was, a very true statement up until, I guess, now that we've been a little bit more successful in the FIF funding. So I think that's obviously been something that's improved, I guess, as of recent. But I guess if there's other mechanisms that can help us facilitate it further, and even other counties, I guess, that probably have not been as successful as the counties, El Paso County. Maybe that's something that we would still like.
Are there funding things that you've considered? And we're going to hit funding again later. But is there something that you would like to do to get funding that because of the state's restrictions on counties you can't do? That's really what this is about. Is there something the state could do to make it easier for you to do something to get funding that you can't currently do?
Yeah, I know that we in the past we had considered doing to do some I guess and I apologize, I can't think of how to describe it, but it was just to be able to implement like stormwater fees, I guess, and we did find that as a challenge. There was some issues and challenges that came across that, and it just that just never materialized. So that's something that maybe if the legislature could allow something to have, for that to happen, without so many challenges, that would probably help as well.
Okay, so we'll keep it.
I'm sorry, real quick, if I can just interject on that note. I know that Jose Landeros, he's the one who had led the charge at the county for them to review the possibility of creating a stormwater district for the county. And there were impediments to that where they would have to propose new legislation. So is that kind of along the lines of what you're saying, Gilbert?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then if I may.
And who is the contact for that, Annette?
Jose Landeros, I can send that to you right now.
Yeah, I know.
He's
Jose.
the county.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
And it's because they wanted to house a stormwater district within the county, or were they okay with it being a separate entity?
I don't think that the discussions had gotten that far. I know that there was the concern was that the way that the legislation is right now, they really couldn't tax anyone, so they weren't going to generate any revenue. And so that, if I can remember that, I think that was like the main concern. And so they I don't know if that's gonna be, if it fell off their legislative agenda or if that's something that they're still pursuing, but I can get you the backup to that information. I'll email Mr. Landeros right now.
And would you copy Gilbert, obviously, and
Yes,
and me? So I think, so like I said, we're going to fill out the table with the things we can discuss today, right? But we're just going to put something like a place setter in for this one, and then Gilbert, after he's talked with Jose, can put a more detailed description of what the legislation would have to address. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I mentioned the Harris County road law. I mean, I've provided a copy of that to Gilbert. I don't want to cover that in any great detail today, but Gilbert, you might look at that and discuss it with Jose and see if there's anything in there that's a useful tool that you might consider trying to get done for El Paso County. Do you want to say anything about that now, or just defer?
No, I think I'll definitely I guess discuss it with Mr. Landeros on the, I guess, on that issue, and then we'll get back with you.
All right. So talk about briefly interactions with FEMA and the US IBWC. Are there things that are frustrating the city or the county or the irrigation district on interactions with federal agencies, or with the Corps for that matter? Are there things that are impeding your flood control program because of interactions with federal agencies that may require, having a congressman talk to, deal with it at the federal level? So I'm just going to ask the main people here real quick. Isela, do you have any ideas on that topic?
I'm sorry, I had it on mute. So I guess in terms of just to make sure that we understand correctly, you're saying about any issues that she's running into, that El Paso Water is running into in terms of what the federal agencies are imposing?
Yeah, is there something that there are things which you have risks, flood risks that you're trying to address, right? Are there things, are there things that are being regulated by FEMA or the IBWC or the USACE that could somehow be streamlined to make your life easier, or things that you would like to bring up to the agencies through your congressman that we should put in the flood plan and say it would be useful if FEMA did this, or it would be useful if IBWC did this, or it'd be useful if this could be if it's not legislation and it's just interaction with them, it would go into the other category. Like we put, for instance, interacting with IBWC on the maintenance of the river. That's not really a legislative thing, but it is dealing with a federal agency from outside the state, right? So we're sticking in there under the other category. Are there interactions you would like to have with a federal agency to see if you can facilitate helping your flood mitigation program?
Yeah, so with FEMA, it's really hard for us to apply for any type of grants or to be considered to be, after a disaster, or to be considered a disaster zone, because the threshold is like $3 million per event. So that's really hard for us and the county as well to meet that requirement. So it seems like their standards are more towards coastal areas, and it excludes areas like cars. So that's a big challenge that we have, So we have damages like the ones that we incurred last year, but we're not able to apply for any funding because we don't meet their threshold. So that's one of the things I think they need to consider, that not every city or every county or every state is a coastal state. and they need to have regulations to allow for our, areas such as ours to be able to compete for these grants or funding opportunities.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, you had basically a 100 to 500 year rainstorm in central El Paso. Right? You would think that extreme a storm would allow you to get some kind of relief.
Right, but since we didn't have $3 million of damages per event, then we couldn't do it. So it wasn't like, it was, all your events in the monsoon season, what do they add up to? It's just per event. So if we have, and the event they're considered like, if we have one rain event on one day and another one on the next day, they're two completely separate events that they're considering. So last year we had three extreme ones, but we couldn't apply because we would have had to have 3 million per each one.
So another thing we might add to that particular thought is to do research on what can be included in the damage totals. And so the question may be finding the category of damage that affects y'all, right?
Or maybe even lowering threshold, something smaller that we can compete with.
Another factor, Jeff, if I may, property values in El Paso County are drastically lower. A two-story house in El Paso is equivalent to a two-story house in the coastal area, but the price is so different that damages to a coastal area two-story house essentially are much higher.
That's a great thought. So we want some consideration of the property values in addition to the damage total.
Yes. So of course, because of that, the BCA is usually lower than other areas. So that's one. Also in regards to development, I think we need to, that's something that needs to be specified, that everybody has different standards, but I think we need to follow the most
restrictive, yeah.
Most restrictive, yes. For instance, not right now with our DDM, we're following numbers from Storm 2006, but we know that the Atlas 14 has been implemented in the majority of Texas. And here in El Paso, we're still using the other numbers, right? Which was the best available data that we had. And it won't be until we revise the DDM and submit it for approval that we'll be able to incorporate the new one. So maybe we need to have some language in there, and we're working with Kareem on that we're going to be able to use the best available data, even if there's not an update to the DDM that occurs, right? So one of the big challenges that we have is that right now we have developers reviewing this DDM, and of course they're challenging it and they're asking, okay, show us proof that anything has failed after the new regulations from the 2006 DDM have been in place. And we do have a lot of those, but it's a challenge that, it's extra work and everything. And of course, if something fails, the engineers, they wash their hands and they come back and say, well, you guys approved it, but it's like, well, yeah, but it's not my say on those plans, it's yours. So I don't know if there's something in there that we as far as that, I guess that would be a regulatory, but that may be local, or maybe we can tie it to the state legislation or something.
All right.
We can leverage what's already there.
Those are good. So I think also what you're talking about is if it turns out that some TxDOT standard for the design of their structures within their right of way, if their standard is less than yours, then yours governs, and if yours is less than TxDOT's, then TxDOT's governs, right?
Right.
That's what you're looking for with that competing standards, right?
Right, and then also like with us here in El Paso, we have a lot of You know, we have certain streets, our city of El Paso, others are Texas. So those, there's jurisdictional boundaries that affect, the response that we provide our citizens. And for instance, there's a rain event, there's flooding. A lot of the flooding occurs on Texas right away, but of course it comes to us and we can't do anything about it because of the jurisdictional boundaries. So there has to be some type of agreement that, either they move on it quickly and they do something, or they allow us to move on it. Because there's other things that we
So
have
what
to
was
do.
so I didn't catch your example. You were going pretty fast. So which jurisdiction flowing into your jurisdiction?
So we have Texas jurisdiction and our jurisdiction. So there has to be some type of agreement where we provide a better response, either them or us, without imposing so many hurdles that we have to jump through in order to be able to provide the service, right? Because in our case, we're talking traffic control. Traffic control is ridiculous on Texas right away. So in order for us to be able to move quickly, it just we can't, because of all the things that we have to comply with, and it's very expensive as well.
So we're talking about traffic control during flooding.
Well, not only traffic control, it's just, there has to be some type of something, an MOU, something, I don't know, I don't know what we can do, but it's just so that something, so there could be a better response from either them or us, and, stop the finger pointing. That
So
would
you're
be
talking about response in terms of getting projects implemented, or response during a flood event, or both?
Both.
Okay, all right.
And also with IBWC, we know the issues that we have with the levee, right? So the levees are IBWCs. FEMA has to review and approve, but then IBWC doesn't submit. There has to be a sponsor that submits on behalf of them so that something can get done. You're very aware of this issue. How long did it take for us to certify the levees in the central area, all that area, right? And it wasn't until we went in and became the sponsor that this happened, but those were ready to be certified many years ago. But IBWC, the levees belong to them, they should be doing that, but they're not. So, and if they don't do anything, then the ones affected is, in this case, the city and county of El Paso.
Okay, that's a good point. So one of the comments that it was brought up in another region was establishing a levee safety program similar to dams. I'm not sure you want that to happen, but that's something that might happen anyway. Do you have any thoughts on that, where they, like TCEQ has an inspection program, and right now the state is not really reviewing levees. But this would affect, for instance, where you all have levees within your system outside of IBWC levees, right? But at least you'd have them providing guidance on in the same way that they provide guidance for dams. They would provide guidance for how to, what you have to provide for maintenance. You'd have basically another section of the regs that deals with levees. Would you like to see that or not?
I think that'd be good to have.
All right, so I'm going to pass it off to. I'm going to bring up my. Yeah.
Sorry, I guess I just wanted to also echo on what Isela says. I think it would be a good idea. I think, in my opinion, my question would be is if that is implemented, would they still be overseeing and doing the I guess levies that are in the IBWC's jurisdiction?
Well, the state doesn't regulate federal dams. For instance, there are a lot of core flood control dams in the state. They basically get a buy out of the state. The state doesn't regulate them. So I don't think they would regulate the federal levies. They would probably regulate the levee that's adjacent to the city of Presidio, because it's not a core levee. It was the Corps built it for the city of Presidio. So if it's a Corps built levee that's been turned over to the local sponsor, then it would come under the state program.
Okay.
Right.
And
So
then go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
No, I thought I mean, if we're gonna move on from that, I was just gonna ask you, Isela, if you guys have also experienced issues with TxDOT proceeding with doing improvements that affect the flood zones without really I guess coordinating with you as or the city as as far as like floodplain management.
Yeah, we have that issue a lot, actually, like the expansion that they did on I-10, the I-10 Connect, all those, I mean, we saw an increase of runoff downstream of those properties, and they have more discharge, they have, a lot of, they increase the runoff, and then we're seeing more flooding, we're seeing more properties being damaged, and of course, I mean, they don't take any responsibility for that, and it's affecting us just like with you guys. So, and I know Texas, it's just their corridor, and they do the environmental assessment just on their corridor, and they don't care about anything outside of that. So they're creating adverse impact downstream, which is something that's not allowed. So let
me just interrupt for a second. Alejandra, can you take over command of this?
I've requested control, but I'm not sure who needs to approve that. I'm not getting an approval yet from someone. Annette, maybe, is it on your screen, Annette, by any chance, that I requested control? If not, I can share my screen.
I think if you can share the screen, it probably would be easier because it's not on our side.
Sure.
So I think Alejandra, just share your screen with the matrix.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, real quick, Jeff, before we get started, Anita does have a question or a comment.
Thanks so much. I just didn't want to interrupt anyone. So I work for the TCQ, and so I just wanted to add a couple of things in here that I've been thinking about as I've listened to a lot of these meetings, especially at this point, where I see that the TCQ offers a lot of grant opportunities, primarily related to water quality, TMDLs, septic tanks, things like that. Most of these funds come directly from the federal government, and so it's passed through, and we make determinations about who gets some of these grants. And I realize that their face, a lot of these don't look like they would be applicable to floodplain management, but I think there could potentially be some revisions to these grants that would change the nature of who could apply to some of these grants, where we could incorporate some floodplain management programs into some of them, because we have such a big role in stormwater, and stormwater has so much to do with flooding impacts. So I'd like to explore some of that and potentially put together some recommendations for that aspect of it. And I also wanted to speak a little bit about our dam safety program, because there is a certain amount of value in just having a program that's overseeing levees as well as dams, because it just gives so much impetus to obtaining grant funds, right? If you have a governmental entity that's saying that a system's in poor shape, it will just make it much easier to justify grant funding from various sources. So, it always depends on how many FTEs we get dedicated, how much we actually get involved, how much time we're actually spending overseeing these programs. But even having a minimal program will at least give that aspect, right? You have this violation in place, and then you have to go do something to address that violation, right? So
right, and that's seen in our region, because we have several FMEs and FMSs and FMPs all addressing dams that the state has told us are hydrologically inadequate in the region. So we're basically using that lever where we can.
yeah, and I do understand that sometimes we're reluctant to go that direction because it puts that additional burden to have to do something about it. But yeah, I'm happy to put together at least some information about grant funding that's currently available that might have some flexibility towards some of these projects. Again, I think sometimes if you read them at face value, you don't see that it directly leads to floodplain management, but it really does because of all those impacts to the water quality, especially with sediment. So things like that. I'm happy to put something together for this group.
So
And
Alejandro, will you pick up the, can you share your screen and get onto the,
I am sharing it.
Anita,
think.
while
oh, I see.
while you're adding your to-do list, can I ask you a quick question or request?
Of course.
So one of the issues we're encountering is more and more, I work for the irrigation district. We are trying to use agricultural drains to collect and convey stormwater. And so one of the biggest concerns we have is finding a good spot, a middle ground perhaps, on the relationship between MS4 requirements and our Irrigation Clean Water Act exemptions. What we want to do is we want to find out, we want to get guidance on what we can and cannot do so that we don't, for example, overstep our boundaries or authorities and end up having an MS4 designation where we want to retain our Irrigation Clean Water Act exemptions.
That's a really good question. Are you able to send me an email separate to this?
Yes.
So we can talk through some of this? Because I can contact anybody within the agency who's experts on this. I come from a point of view of enforcement, so that's my level of expertise. But we see this a lot where folks feel like they can do a discharge into waters of the state and they feel like they have an exemption, but they end up crossing the lines of exactly that line.
And we don't want to cross the line. You guys are really expensive.
Well, I also think about the fines that we levy. There's an opportunity through the way that we levy penalties to divert some of the funds that get paid to penalties to projects like this.
Yeah.
So that's where.
All right.
I mean,
So you guys keep penalizing Houston and then give some of that money.
Yes.
Oh, and I also have so many thoughts. I won't go into a lot of detail, but I have so many thoughts about how you cannot regulate stormwater in El Paso like you do on the coast, right? It's such different dynamics. The BMPs have to be so different. So this just seems like there's so many resources for wet areas and so little resources for drier areas. But I'm probably speaking to the choir.
All right, so let me just interrupt for a second. I think we have to back up and I've got some notes. I think Alejandro, you probably have some notes, and let's catch up with this table. So we're going to back up for a minute, and then we're on a nice roll, but we're outpacing we could go back through and listen to it again, but let's just see what we have fairly quickly. So the first one that I have down is under legislative. It's basic under legislative. The flood mitigation is floodplain management, and then creation of need to address lack of fees for county drainage. And the recommendation is investigate feasibility of some form of county stormwater utility. Does that sound okay, Gilbert? And then you can reword that later, right?
Yes.
So another one was you got the monetary threshold one. That's good. We have for the IBW under legislative, maybe put floodplain management, but need to address sponsors, burden on sponsors for certification is excessive. Recommendation is talk to the federal government about lessening the burden.
Are we talking about just standard
For levy certification.
that.
So what's basically happening is everything's being paid for to include writing an O&M plan. I mean, everything's being paid for by the local sponsor. And there ought to be, at least what Gisela was saying, is that there ought to be a more active, more of the steps should be taken by the federal government, or there should be more contributions by the federal government to getting the certification done. Is that the right way to say it?
Should I click here, El Paso Water, and should I add some potential sponsors?
I would just put in the county and the EPW for the sponsors for that one, because they're both involved in the levy certification. So under that one, click the El Paso County also, which is the second column G. Okay, so we want to get this whole issue of make it regulatory admin again, a new one. And then put floodplain management. And then there's a risk of loss of CWA exemption. No C in exemption. Risk of loss of CWA exemption with stormwater in drains. We'll know what, we'll reword this later. And then the recommendation is that develop clear guidance to ensure exemption is retained. Is that the right way to say it?
Yes, thank you. Yes, and then while we're in this topic, we are very interested in stormwater capture and reuse where it makes sense. And so I don't know if there's any standards for surface water storage, water quality issues, environmental issues, when you're going to blend stormwater, treated wastewater, and Rio Grande project water ultimately. We're talking about the Socorro Ponds project, but I really would need some guidance on right of capture issues and things like that. I just, it's such a different case from what I've seen in other areas that I don't know, and I'm not able to find the guidance on it either.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtleties to your situation because you get stormwater whether you want it or not. Right? I mean, it's not like you're trying to get stormwater in general. It just happens because you're the lowest conveyance in the terrace, right?
Yes.
So put under regulatory admin, another one, and then put floodplain management, and then put remind me again what that one was, Omar, one more time.
Stormwater capture reuse for surface water storage. It's a lot clearer for percolation and groundwater storage, but for surface water, there's very limited guidance, especially when you're water quality issues. Just blending.
Just put a question mark on there. And then under recommendations, say develop guidance, develop clear guidance, right? To ensure compliance. Just say clear guidance to ensure compliance. And you could say, and also optimize opportunities for capture, right?
Oh, benefit.
Right, because I think you want the water if you can get it, right? If it's in good enough quality.
Yes, and if it's not, we want to blend, and we just want to be able to meet quality standards.
Yeah, for capture / blend.
Yes.
Yeah, because right now, I mean, there's drains that are not being used anymore, and we can use them for stormwater, but we have to. There's a gray area right there, and we're gonna have to berm so that it doesn't go into other, I guess, into other counties, right? So there's a lot of things that need to be done so that in order for us to be able to use the drains that are no longer being used for irrigation for stormwater.
All right, so so Alejandro, so there was another one on which Gisela was talking about that was dealing with the coordination issues on everything, on planning. So put it under, put one under each thing, put one under regulatory admin, put one under other, and put one under implementation. And then
Fundraising or just?
those two, and then under regulatory admin, add three cases, add all three: flood mitigation, flood planning, and flood implementation, all three. And then put need, so coordination with the main ones you're talking about are TxDOT, right?
With the other jurisdiction?
Yeah, the other jurisdictions, the ones I was hearing was there's for coordination with other jurisdictions to
It's other jurisdictions in general, because we have Fort Bliss, we have Texas, we have City of El Paso, so just other jurisdictions in general. Because with the
okay, well,
with
let's list them though.
et cetera.
Yeah, so the main ones are going to be TxDOT, IBWC, who owns the state parks? That's another one, right? The state lands, GLO?
Yeah, the state park, that's usually Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Okay, Texas Parks. So those state lands on the west side, that's TPW lands?
Yes.
Okay.
And then also private owners, so all those.
And also IBWC, obviously.
So we're trying to facilitate stormwater.
So we're facilitating all three. We're facilitating implementation, we're facilitating management, we're facilitating planning. All three of those need to be improved, correct? Right? And then, so the recommendation is to create protocols to facilitate project implementation. And then you do you just copy that one down. Yeah, and the other one where it says project implementation, you say project management, project say to facilitate floodplain management. I'm sorry, the one above it should say floodplain management. And the last one is to facilitate flood mitigation planning. All right. So what other ones? We were kind of running ahead of ourselves. There were some other good ones in there.
I have the local standards that we talked about, where for instance, the private developer comes back and doesn't want more stringent standards, but then complains about it when something happens.
Okay, so I think for that we say regulatory admin, flood mitigation planning.
Is it planning?
Floodplain management, sorry, floodplain management. And then say codify use of most restrictive standard where conflicts exist. Does that make sense? Gisela? So if they're going through a text dot culvert, they're going to have to use the NOAA 14 because they have a higher standard, for instance, right? Or if if it's a city going into a county and the county is using NOAA 14, then they got to use NOAA 14, basically, right?
Yeah, and then also I think we need to have something in there about adverse impact. Because everybody just disregards the no adverse impact requirement.
And that's a good point. Flood infrastructure fund, you're supposed to consider it, but TxDOT is notorious for not considering for our purposes at the irrigation district, any crossing that TxDOT updates, reconstructs, we actually ask them to build it larger and stronger than they would. It's a fight with them because we know growth is happening. We know downstream discharge on the drains is growing. And we know that it's going to take a while for even TxDOT to clean their own culverts.
All right, so let's go back up to line 23, where it says create protocols to facilitate floodplain management. Add on there in parentheses, say require no adverse impact. Right, so that's basically what I think you're saying, right? We're going to make all these people that we coordinate with, whatever they do, they have to demonstrate no adverse impact. Isn't that what you're saying, Omar?
Yes, and because we know that there will be adverse impact over time. It's just that they don't acknowledge it.
Right.
Did I add El Paso irrigation district in here
Yes.
on all three, or well, just this one and then?
Yeah, I think all three, and probably the county for all three. Again, saying you're sponsoring doesn't necessarily mean you're signing on to pay for it. You're just saying that you want to be in the room, and then you can work out how it gets paid later, right? So Gilbert Sadani, you're not committing to counting money on this.
There am I, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
We're going to have the same speech when we start having these. This afternoon, we have a meeting with the largest town in the afternoon meeting is like 10,000 people, right? So they're, they have no money, right? So we have to be very sensitive on what they think they're committing to. All right, so okay, I think we're finally going back. I'm going to take control. Does this capture the conversations we've already had? What Alejandro just said? Are there things we're missing? Or we got those? Particularly you, Gisela, because you mentioned a whole lot of things.
Sure.
Do we still have Gisela, or is she gone? Oh, she's
No, down here.
So it looks good?
Yeah, so there's one that we didn't bring up, and that's regarding funding.
Okay.
One of the things, so I don't know if we can talk about it here, or do we wait?
I mean, if you got it on your brain, let's do it now, because you only have so much time, right?
So maybe have like a revolving loan fund using state money that we can use as a match for federal dollars. So one of the things that Omar was explaining to me that right now the PIF is not self-sustainable, right? But then maybe that's something that they can work towards so that we can use that revolving loan so that we can use to match federal dollars.
That may be legislative. I'm not sure if you might be able to do that already. I'm pretty sure, for instance, we have a number of projects which are dam projects, which the state is covering the local contribution.
And yeah, but the idea is like with the clean water and drinking water revolving loan funds, I know that they come from federal government's their ultimate source, and then the interest is then used to implement loan forgiveness. Here with the FIF, it's great in this first round. We had all this money and there's a lot of free money available, but then how long will the goodwill of the state last? And the idea is, can we create then or modify the existing program to build something more sustaining, something closer to SWIFT, which is self-sustaining?
Okay, so use revolving state funds to provide matching, right?
Yes.
Okay. Provide matching to federal dollars. So get some clarity on that issue. Taylor, you want to chime in on that at all? Are you familiar with this issue at all?
Yeah, and I agree. We've seen in the past you're able to spend state funds that come through loan programs as federal match. Typically, you just can't use federal to federal dollars. As far as, yeah, on the inland side, I don't know of any revolving funds that currently exist. There have been attempts on the coastal side to set some up, and TxDOT's trying to get one. In particular, the Maritime Division is trying to set one up for ship channels. But on the inland side, I don't know of any revolving ones at the moment.
All right, so what Gisela is asking for is let's establish one to deal with floods, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, so rather than say use revolving state funds, say create revolving state funds to provide matching to federal dollars for FMPs.
And the Water Development Board has it has a Rural Water Assistance Fund, which is a loan program, but I don't believe it's revolving.
Yeah, and we'll have, okay.
There may be others.
So anything else before we move on in the agenda?
I think that's all that we could think of so far.
All right, so I'm going to take it back now. Okay, so we've gone through this one. We may have gone through most of this one. Does anybody have any additional ideas on how flood mitigation planning, the actual act of coming up with defining the risks and creating alternatives? Are there obstacles to planning that you all want to bring up? You all are pretty well off because you all have that taken care of with master plans we have for both the city and the county. I don't know about the irrigation district, Omar, whether there's a need. You all do any flood specific type planning or how that works with your entity?
We want to, but we have to be careful on how we spend our tax dollars. Our legal team is very particular with what authority from the Texas Water Code we use and how we spend that money. And it's actually embedded into an accounting system. So we technically do not have an authority to deal with flood planning issues. Essentially, anything we do, we have to get a grant for, and planning would be included. So I can allocate some time, like on the download, wherever. But if you wanted, for example, to hire an engineering firm and then use our local dollars for that, chances are we're going to have to justify it through like a stormwater capture idea. And that's why I'm pushing it so much, because we're real big on the authorities we have from the Texas Water Code and what we can use and we can't use. That's why I keep saying we're not in the trails business for other projects. Here in El Paso, they want to use a lot of our canals for trails and our drains for trails. And so we're limited on how much money we can spend for that effort.
So that same line where we talked about that issue already in the table, we could create essentially 3 different lines, one for each of these cases, right? One for the management case, one for the planning case, and one for the implementation case, because they all come out of that issue that you've got to make sure that you're in compliance with what the rules are for an irrigation district, right?
Yes.
All right, so I think that's what we're going to do, Alejandra. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
So just split that up in 3 parts and just like we did for one of the other ones, and give it 3 lines for each one of these cases.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to skip on to the next one. So implementation. So are there any issues that we need to bring up with implementation? So let's say you get the money from whatever source to do projects. What are the things that affect implementation of the mitigation measure that you would like to see facilitated? I think we've already got covered the multiple agency issue, because I think Isella's already brought that up and we have it in the table. But are there any specific issues that are less general that we want to bring up in this category? Not, I'm going to move on.
Before we
Okay.
move on, so we have the Historic Preservation Office. So, yeah, a lot of our projects get derailed because, of course, historic preservation, we have to coordinate with that. So that is a very problematic with us, where it becomes a matter of what, and I'm not saying historic preservation is not important, but it comes to the point where what's more important, public safety or historic preservation? So maybe there needs to be a balance, or there needs to be something where I don't know, some coordination, something, so that, projects that are for public safety can move forward a little bit quicker. I don't know.
So
So I don't
well,
think
how about this? How about if we basically say coordinate with Historic Preservation Office to develop acceptable mitigation practices for the El Paso region?
Yeah, because for instance, with the Frontera Force main break that we had last year, there's areas where we haven't been able to touch to clean up, because they won't even let us touch toilet paper that's on the ground, because it's historic preservation. So it's like, how are we supposed to remediate it if we can't even go in there and clean it up? So it's been a year and we haven't been able to do much to it. So there's that. And
All right,
it's a
so
matter
let's say create guidelines create procedures for accelerating compliance with the Historic Preservation Office, meaning that coordinate with them to find, you say this is an issue, how are we going to fix this, and have them see what we're doing with this plan is we're telling them what the issues are, right? So
Right.
So basically the plan will say there have been instances of excessive delays due to an inability to comply with the requests of the Historic Preservation Office. There needs to be some avenue to appeal when this occurs or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you need, right? So we have a way to say, all right, time out. We're gonna cry wolf on this one, and say this one's important. We have to find a way through this, right?
right.
And you just
And
can't.
Jeff,
Yeah.
we're actually experiencing something similar with the Texas Historical Commission. I will say in the last 5 years, they've gotten tougher and more restrictive. As you might know, the irrigation district, including drains, are all in the national list of historic places. It's the entire system that's supposed to be protected. And we're here selling drains and covering up drains and properties. And so they've gotten very protective of our system. We have a working MOU with them, established in 1996 when Reclamation gave us the system. And they've been working real hard on reworking that MOU. So we found a way that we found a middle ground agreement on the things we have to do to mitigate impact. But even if we follow the MOU, their latest determinations have always been that there is there's going to be impact to historic properties. Whereas 5 years ago, the exact same project, exact same procedure received a determination of no adverse impact. So there's changes within the Texas Historical Commission that I think are I don't know if they're getting stricter or there's new rules offered at the federal level that they keep justifying themselves on. But I think it is worthy having a conversation with them because most of the drainage issues in our situation, like in the valley, in the lower valley, a lot of those properties that are considered historic or whatever is because they don't have adequate drainage infrastructure anyway. And so there's this mechanism where we have to protect these properties, but these properties are in flood prone areas because back when they were built, they weren't any drainage standards. So it's both happening in both the canal system and the drain system, and then properties adjacent to the canal system. Those the Texas Historical Commissions are getting real tough. So I do agree that we need to have some sort of guidance, some sort of standards, sort of holding back the reins of the Historical Commission, because I mean, they're great at what they do, but I think that in the last 5 years, they've gotten really regulatory on us. Whereas even, for example, what they do is they justify themselves. They give us feedback within the 30 days as they're legally required to do. But they generally say, oh, we were not able to make a determination, insufficient information for any little excuse. So they prolong a 30-day method with, I don't know, 90, 120 days. But they use their existing authorities to do so.
Like the public safety aspect and the preservation.
So it's very complex, I think. And I think we need to at least try to think about recommendations.
So Alexandra, could you take back again and let's type in a couple of things?
I added some comments for our youth. Comments.
Okay, so go down and say under regulatory admin, regulatory admin, and then under flood mitigation category, say implementation. Okay. Yeah, those are good. And then do another one. We'll figure out how to edit these later. I just want to capture the thought. Okay. And then under implementation, say need to address potential shortfalls with existing with use of existing MOUs. And then under recommendation is say negotiate with the state historic preservation office to address shortfalls.
And Jeff, if you might add, they seem to follow the latest federal recommendations, and that's maybe why they've gotten stricter. So this is, I think it's a federal issue that's trickling down to state level.
So would it be legislative, do you think?
Yeah, so put it under legislative. Yeah, but another one. No, a different one. I'd leave that one. And then add another one that says same thing, mitigation. And then say need to address new federal requirements. Just say new federal requirements on addressing historic preservation. And then put as recommendation, develop comments to be provided to the federal agency. In other words, if the state is using the federal agency as the reason, then the federal agency must not understand the impacts of what they're doing. We should at least send them some kind of letter saying this is what our situation is. Can you help? Right? Does that sound right? Omar, Gisela?
Yeah, that's a great start. That's a great way of putting it, Joe.
All right, so All right, so I'm gonna take it back again. So I know you have to go in another 10 minutes, right, Gisela?
Yes.
So, you know, you can keep talking on whatever topic you want to talk about. Because otherwise, I mean, we certainly want to get your input before you go. Okay, so let's see. So under regulatory or admin recommendations, state entities need to comply with local regulations. We've already discussed that one. Local and regional officials are often unaware of their authority to establish and enforce stormwater regulations. That's more applicable to the afternoon one than this one. So this is just here to use as a tickler for, you know, we had that list of things that we were going to address with the changes to the drainage design manual. I was thinking the drainage design manual might want to address more specifically some of these things. No rise at the property boundary, no rise downstream of the property boundary, whether you want to have it or not. Do we want to put in the drainage design manual was way before 2D modeling? Do we want to get 2D modeling somehow in the drainage design manual? I mean, I would think that's something we want in there, but your thoughts?
Yes, we need to put the 2D modeling on there, definitely.
All right. So Alejandra, can you add that in? Just add it in on that one where we talk about, we have the list of things as the curb cuts and the just.
And I think we also have to put something regarding the, oh God, get the word. Freeboard. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, add freeboard requirements in there also. Alejandra.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do any of these things ring any bells? We already have a FMS dealing with natural channels. We don't have, do we need anything on infrastructure maintenance issues? Defining who's responsible for maintenance of infrastructure. Is there anything that that needs to be discussed on that topic? Between the city, the county, and the irrigation district, are there maintenance things that you're doing that you think somebody else should be doing, or should be contributing to the effort, or however you want to say that?
I think we have the biggest issue with TxDOT.
Which is what?
On the infrastructure maintenance issue.
And how what's the issue? Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example?
Have time. Like, they don't maintain, we can't maintain, it's theirs, and they say it's ours. Just different things. And so I think infrastructure maintenance issues, it needs to be addressed because even locally, you know, with streets and storms, so it's just different things that infrastructure maintenance issue.
All right, so the thing, so it would be in the other category, Alejandra, and it will be coordinate with TxDOT to get clarity on maintenance at specific locations within jurisdictions. You basically create an MOU type thing where it's clear who's got it, right? Isn't that what we're after, Gisela?
Yes, and also, I don't know where that one would go, but for instance, on development grading permits, the city issues grading permits for buildings, and then right away they start installing the drainage system, and even though it's not approved yet, so those are issues, I guess, on the permitting side that need to be addressed. You know, if it's a grading permit for a building, then it's just for the building, but not for the utility work that needs to be added. I'm not sure if that'll go here or where it'll go.
We'll just put it under other for the time being. I think it's going to be under floodplain management, because basically it means that the building could be built without the infrastructure to properly drain it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know if it could be built, but I mean, not releasing any permits until everything's approved. But there's so much push that they need to get started with the project. And
so is there an issue? Is there an issue with that if it's not affecting the drainage? I mean, how does it affect? How does the order of the permit affect flooding? Is it what's the issue that happens in flooding because of that?
So the issue, I guess, they can approve the building, but there has to be maybe different permits that are issued, because once they get a grading permit, they just go and they start installing the drainage infrastructure that's not even approved yet, or there still need to be I don't know, it's not approved yet. So they start working off of plans that are not approved. So at the end of the project, I mean, that's already installed. So going back and making
right,
them,
so
of course, it's just hard.
We'll try to get some clarity on this, but I think the way we can put it down is provide guidance on order of permit approvals to ensure continuity of drainage protection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we have that problem locally. I'm not sure if you have it, Gilbert.
Yes, I think we have similar experiences with that as well. So,
right. I seem to recall when we were doing approvals for the city, they have a problem with approving the grading plans before they actually get the floodplain permit done, which is a problem. Right. So I think the issue is coordinate grading approvals with flood risk. I think is the simplest way to say it.
Permit approval or coordinate?
Grading plan approval, grading plan / other permit approval with flood risk. And just leave it open. It's a point for discussion that we have to define the issue better, and if there's an issue, we solve it, right? But we get with the developers and basically do something in consensus. Okay, on to the next one. So encouraging entities to work together towards regional flood mitigation solutions. I think this goes together with Gisella's original comment about coordinating with agencies. I think we'll let that one go on. Now, are you all familiar with TWIC? Gilbert or Gisela?
No, not me.
All right, so Taylor, you want to brief on this, or shall I demonstrate my ignorance by trying to summarize this?
I'll probably let you take this one.
All right. Well, my understanding from talking with Susan Roth is that there's this Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Committee that deals with helping Texas water management agents, water management conveyors, right? Water supply management people, gives them help on funding eligibility and technical assistance. So there's a statewide organization that helps them helps people can go to say, I want money from the revolving fund. What am I eligible for? And can you help me do the grant, right? And I don't know much about this entity, but it's there for the benefit of the water purveyors. And it fills a need for people that don't necessarily have the grant expertise. And they also provide potentially review on what people produce, right? So the idea is to produce a similar organization statewide and say, we think there needs to be a statewide organization that helps people who are applying for grants from the Texas Water Development Board flood infrastructure funds, that there's somebody who keeps track of all the funding eligibility things, some entity that we can go to ask questions when we're doing our grants. Does that sound like an idea you all would buy into? Some kind of statewide help on this? And I don't think it's Water Development Board. I think it's yeah.
One of the things that I like to advocate instead of that is for us to have a more regional approach to technical assistance for getting funding for these types of projects. There's entities like Communities Unlimited and the Texas Rural Water Association, something like that. There's entities that have been trying to do this, but obviously West Texas has really not benefited from a lot of their efforts. And so I think that if you centralize it, you'll face the same issues that these other entities are facing. So if it's, I'm okay with including this line item, but can we then include an alternative saying, can we build something similar or to like the flood planning groups, or expand the authority, like the permissions of the flood planning groups, so that members themselves can provide this technical assistance? I don't know how we would do it, but I think there needs to be more regionalism when it comes to this assistance. Each region knows itself best.
I think that's a great idea. And I think, how about something where the COG doesn't run this thing, but the COG coordinates it, where, there's a bunch of grant writers all across the state. And I think Annette knows most of them because they're the ones that I think she interacts with the most, right? But we could create like a mutual support regionally that's coordinated through the COG, that if somebody wants to apply under a particular program, there's a routine meeting where people basically get together and say, we're having problems with this issue on a grant. What can be done to basically short circuit this? So there's some general region-wide learning that happens on the funding.
Yeah.
So that's what you're talking about, right, Omar?
Yes. Give money to the COG to help with the grant writing. In summary.
Yeah. I don't, but it would have to be. How does that sound to you, Annette?
Well, I think that we're hopefully going to be having an opportunity to showcase this potential with some of our communities in El Paso County. So I think we could definitely be a great pilot to show how we can coordinate at a level that's so much more strategic, and it's not going to be so time consuming where, we're having meetings just to have meetings, but we may have an opportunity to just gather our smaller communities to let them know what's available to them, and make sure that we pair them with the right resources so that way we can get the capacity for them to apply. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it could be like a, technical, in ACOM, we have a technical practice group. That's basically just a, email form. I mean, an online forum, right? So people could go to the online forum and, people would get alerts that somebody's asked a question, and they could chip in and say, I know about this topic or not, right? So I think we're all tired of meetings at this point. So yeah, I think the more that we can make this into an online resource that's somehow regularly monitored and and prompted, I think that would be good. So Alejandra, can you write that up? We aren't going to talk about TWIC. We're going to talk about a regional construct.
Okay, I wrote it down. Sponsors potentially is Water Improvement District. Anybody else have
Well, the COG, right? And it would be, I think you just leave it at the COG for the time being.
Okay.
Okay, another thing is statewide databases. I mean, at one point there was a statewide database on high water marks. I don't know if you all know this, but there was a system by which the state collected data that was useful for helping entities understand their local hydrology. And particularly in the West, where you have an awful lot of initial losses because of the nature of the terrain, right? It's really important to have records of what happens during the extreme floods so that you have a way to calibrate what you're doing so you don't overbuild in one place and not build elsewhere. You really want to focus what's needed, right? So one thing, one idea would be to formalize a request to the state to provide a repository for post-flood data. So Isela, you know, you all went out and collected data after that 2022 flood, right? And 2021 flood. This situation would be that the state would create a database that had metadata that says this is the format of what we need you to do. You provide this. You have to provide the coordinates. You have to provide an elevation. You have to provide the basis of the elevation, whether it's your phone or a survey, whatever. But there would be a documented set of post-flood records. There would be photos and whatever it is, but it's all in some state GIA database. Does that seem like a useful thing or not?
Yes, please include it.
Gisela's not here.
Okay, all right. Okay, Alejandra, can you put that in?
Yes, so the need to address, I put it as a recommendation, but the need to address is because there's no data available post-flood.
There's no systematic data collection for this topic, right? And it actually saves a lot of effort for entities because they don't, you know, if you do this, you just fill in a menu on a phone, right? I mean, you could just basically have it that you go to the state website, you get the app, and then you fill it in, and it just goes immediately into the state database. With some, you know, it had to be some QA on it, but the state would define that, right? So it's just an idea. Okay, on to the next one. So I think we've discussed grants, and I think the same regional thing that Omar was talking about would not only help with grant application, but it would also help with identifying funding sources, right? So that's all rolled up into there. So I think we've already covered this one. I'm looking through it. I think we've covered the interjurisdictional issues earlier in the meeting. I think we've covered this one. So funding opportunity recommendations. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is how well does El Paso County in its development of the hazard mitigation plan, how well are they coordinating with the local flood risk, the flood managers? Is Gilbert Saldana still on the call?
Yes.
Yes, I'm still here, Eric.
So do you know, do the emergency management people at the county, when they're creating this periodic hazard mitigation plan, the FEMA required plan, are they coordinating with you to make sure that your projects get in that plan?
Yes.
So there's a formal procedure within the county to make sure that the projects in the county master plan get in that county plan.
Yes, sir.
That's great. Okay. So do you want to talk, Taylor? We haven't picked on you yet too much in this meeting. You want to talk a little bit about funding opportunities out of HUD and what might be recommendations to facilitate that within the region?
I can talk a little bit about that, yeah. And I mean, hopefully some of the things I think the community is at least aware of at some level. And I think for El Paso, it sounds like y'all are, because similar to the local hazard mitigation plan that FEMA requires, HUD, they have their action plans that come out locally and then are put together into a consolidated plan. And so they'll look to that for annual allocations that they make. So there are eligible funds annually. Now, a lot of that is housing focused rather than infrastructure focused, but they will make allocations based on what's in their 5-year consolidated plan. And El Paso has received funding from that historically, so I think it is something that that y'all are familiar with there. The other things that
yeah, but I think it's sort of like with the hazard mitigation plans. A lot of times those plans aren't necessarily focused on flooding, right? So the question is, you know, and like you said, the HUD one is focused on housing, but there are small business administration grants associated with reducing flooding on existing exposed housing, correct or not?
There are some, there is some availability to use funding if those projects are in the action plan toward flooding projects.
Do they have to be in the action plan as a housing project or as a flooding project? Can they be in there as a flood? I'm putting you on the spot here. What I'm looking for is if there's information that we might, if there's actions in terms of interagency coordination or data collection by entities that might be facilitated in order to improve the hit rate on getting flood mitigation support out of HUD. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Any thoughts on that? And everybody, this is totally blind. She's being blindsided here.
I believe you can, because you can include infrastructure as well as housing, is my understanding. And so I believe you can have infrastructure projects that relate to flooding. So I can also confirm that, but.
So Gilbert, do you have any ideas on that? Gilbert Saldana, have you dealt with getting HUD money for flooding before?
No, I know, like, I was just gonna share with you earlier, it was that just from what I recall is on the flood hazard mitigation plans, you know, it would just, I guess, adopt our stormwater master plan, to adopt or to put in all those projects into that plan to make them eligible for for some other funding. But as far as the HUD specifically, I'm not too familiar with that one.
Yeah, so I think
Jeff.
maybe, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
My first job out of college was at the El Paso Housing Authority. So I'm familiar with HUD funding, and we did try to tap, I'm not sure if it's the same name, Small Business Administration Planning. What was happening here in El Paso is we were transitioning from federally owned public housing to locally owned through a program called RAD. Anyway, we tried to tap into this, but if I recall correctly, back then, and we're talking like 6 years ago, flooding issues were not, like drainage issues were really not the big priority funding for this area. Like you could include a small component of it, but it wasn't the priority, like what you wanted to focus your money on, essentially, on those programs. And HUD is very restricted with their funding. So the name rings a bell. I think it's the same program. I'll have to look back at my records, but we wrote an application, and it was the Taste community, which is right then in central El Paso, near Bowie High School area. That one is prone to flooding. And one of the issues we wanted to resolve was flooding, but they were very strict on what percentage of the budget you can give to drainage issues and things like that. They essentially wanted us to focus on quality of life and supplemental programs for residents, not so much the infrastructure. So it'd be great if the program has changed, if you all look into it, or I can look into it, however you want to do it. But I do think this is a new resource, and I don't think anybody here has tapped into it.
All right, so what we're finding out is that within the region, it's not a resource that we're routinely accessing, right? And I recall after Harvey, there were large CDBG grants that went to the city of San Marcos to deal with the flooding that occurred out of the Blanco River, right? And there was significant HUD money to deal with disadvantaged neighborhoods within the city of San Marcos. And I think there's neighborhoods like that in the Terrace, in El Paso County and in Hudspeth County. There may be things that can be done to facilitate getting those grants. So I think, Alejandra, the action here is to increase coordination between the city, county, and HUD to basically develop procedures and databases which meet HUD's requirements. Does that make sense, Alejandra?
Yeah, I guess the need to address would be to allocate or find a way to allocate some of the HUD funds for flood planning.
I think it's more is there a way, is there data that we're not collecting? For instance, like this requirement to be in the action plan, right? If there's an action plan for a community that gets submitted to HUD, what needs to be done when the action plan is submitted to make sure that the flood components are eligible, right? So,
and the other, if I may, the other reason for that too, for the kind of forward planning, is that when there is another disaster, or there are other competitions for CDBG, either mitigation or disaster recovery funds, to already have those projects listed in the plan just makes it easier to get that funding if and when there is a disaster that comes around.
correct. So this is basically, this goes under flood mitigation planning, and it's basically prepare for future disasters, prepare documentation for HUD applications post future disasters is the way I'd phrase it. 100.
When y'all say HUD small business, that would be separate from like block grants, right? From the TDA.
That's the same thing. This is CDBG is under HUD.
Okay, perfect.
That's a good question. Never asked that, yes. So I think we already created a note on development fees and utility fees that Gilbert brought up earlier. So I don't think I need to slow us down for that. And we're not going to have any vote today. Like I said, what we're going to do, Alejandro, you want to pick up, show your
Sure.
spreadsheet again? Okay, so what we're going to do after this meeting is we're going to fill out this table, and we're going to copy all the people who attended this meeting. And if people have edits, please make edits, but highlight the cells that you edit. And if in discussions within your organization you come up with other ideas, please add them to the table. Just make sure you put the recommendation category and the flood mitigation category in there. There's a drop-down menu and who's going to sponsor it. And send it back. We'll give you, it'll be pretty quick. Can we give you a goal to get it turned around by COB Tuesday next week? Gilbert?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I did have a couple that I wanted to add, and I guess I probably missed the opportunity to mention it earlier, but
no, mention
but
it.
we can
Mention it now. We have 10 minutes. What else do you want to add?
So I know that we, had previously talked about, the county's lack of ability to sometimes require drainage, improvements on certain areas of the county. So, I was wondering if it could be looked at as far as the ability for counties to adopt drainage requirements for all development. Beyond areas that are in flood zones. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, I get it. So you're looking for and I think if you look at that road law, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you look at that road law, I think that's not restricted to the flood zone.
Okay.
So you might look at that and just say, similar to what's provided in the Texas road law, this section, right? Because they basically, if it drains onto a county road, right? And the county road doesn't have to be in the floodplain, then you get to regulate they get to regulate the drainage, right?
Right.
So you might kind of look at that and see what within that law is something you might think would be a useful lever that you could use, because there's a precedent for that one, right?
Okay.
So
yes.
Yeah, so we'll add that one. Do you have another one to go in?
The other one that we had looked at, and it just hasn't really materialized much, is we've looked at the possibility of including drainage requirements to be part of the certificate of compliance that the counties issue. Currently, a property owner just needs to show that they have adequate water and sewer, but it's the drainage component is not part of that requirement. And so, I mean, in plats, we do require, for developments and subdivisions to provide adequate water, sewer, and drainage, but the certificate is not specifically, tied to the drainage component. It's just water and sewer.
Okay.
I want to piggyback off that a little bit. And I know it'll kind of be more in the rural area communities, but for instance, in Ector County, if you don't have to go get a building permit if you're building outside of, Odessa's ETJ and you're already a platted property, all you have to do is build whatever structure you want. If you're not getting a permit for a new septic system, there is no review of any building or development going on. So there's no way to catch whether your finished floor is 2 foot above, existing ground or some type of comparison for flood mitigation. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So Levi, we're having a meeting at 1 p.m. Mountain that includes a lot of the smaller communities in the flood planning area. I think you know that, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that we're going to be certainly bring that up at that point because we're going to have a slightly different focus in that meeting. But yeah, that's a good comment. So I think that's basically just reinforcing the one we just met, right, Levi?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's basically confirming the need outside of El Paso. So I think that pretty much concludes. I think we've had a very productive meeting. Thank you very much. This will be a useful list, and we will finalize this and get it out hopefully by COB tomorrow, and put a due date to get the edits back by COB Tuesday.
And Jeff, if it's okay, we do have Richard who joined us with Water Development Board. Richard, is there anything that you would like to add to this discussion before we conclude?
Nothing to add, just appreciating everyone's contributions to this. And just stating that, of course, TWDB stays neutral on these, and you guys are welcome to put all of your recommendations out there.
Thank you. And Jeff, I'm sorry, did we agree on a date to reconvene, or?
I need to talk to Chris. He kind of manages the whole program schedule, and I have to plead ignorance. When do you think we should have it? When's the next? I'd like to have it before the next full meeting. When's the next full meeting?
The next meeting, I think the winning date was a day that I can't remember. It's July. I think it's July 23rd. Let's just do this. If you're okay with the chair, I'll send out a poll for available dates based on your discussion with Chris.
Yeah, and I think it also hinges on when our draft of Task 8 has to be complete, right? I think this next meeting, we're going to have this table finished by Wednesday of next week, so we could have it any time after Wednesday of next week, and I think it's going to be a half-hour meeting. I think people will defend what they add to the table, the changes they make to the table, but I think we have consensus to the ones we've already added in. Does anybody on the call have any objections to including the ones that we've already developed today and have been in the table? We've been going over them with the table.
No,
If not,
it's to be inclusive.
Yeah, I think we're not going to go over these again in our next meeting. We're going to deal with the changes, and then we'll vote to include the revised table as a recommendation to the full committee, to the full board, as a committee recommendation to the board of what goes in Task 8.
Right, and then I think just to follow up on the meeting this afternoon, we do have a confirmation. Chairman Martinez will be present. I believe that Levi said he'll be able to jump on at that time as well. And then also we will have in person here with us the county judge for Presidio and the county administrator for Hudspeth. And then we did get confirmations virtually from the others that we had mentioned previously, like I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, Martha and Alpine, and on the county side, Brewster. We also had Sonora. So hopefully we'll have a good group of folks for the afternoon meeting.
And we're going to have a spectacular group of folks. It's taken us 6 months, but we're finally getting a lot of people joining us. So that's really thank you, Annette. I mean, I think you've been the impetus behind a lot of that. So it's been a big help.
Glad to help. So Chairman Martinez,
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
do you want to make the motion?
Bye.
Yes, make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
Levi, all right.
The person second, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Anybody
everybody.
opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Alejandra.